everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Do Good to Lead Well podcast series. I'm your host, Craig Dowden. Really appreciate that you've taken the time out of your hectic schedule to join us today. If you're in the live audience, you're in for a real treat. And as always, have the opportunity to ask your questions to one of the top CEOs, globally recognized, respected CEOs. For those of you who are listening in, also awesome to have you with us. As a quick origin story for the Do Good to Lead Well, this podcast series, webinar series, was created in advance of the publication of my first book, Do Good to Lead Well, The Science and Practice of Positive Leadership. And one of the things that I wanted to do was share the amazing conversations that I'm so privileged to be a part of with top CEOs, best-selling authors, TED speakers, global thought leaders with a wider audience. And this is where the genesis of that origin story. And what I want to do through these conversations is really learn about the leadership journey, the leadership philosophy, lessons learned, ways in which that we can show up to maximize our impact, have the impact that we most want to have on the people and the organizations that we're connected with. And I have to start this episode with an incredibly heartfelt thank you. It's just been an amazing period in the Do Good to Lead Well universe. Because of your ongoing support, your social shares, your comments, your guest suggestions, your feedback, we have been rated in the top 0.5% of all podcasts globally. We cracked the top 50. We were ranked number 21 in business podcasts in the US. And recently we were in the top 150 of all podcasts in Canada. So this cannot happen without you. We've just really valued your engagement with the conversations that we have, and we really want to shine a light on positive leadership. And the main reason this podcast has really touched and connected with audiences is because of the extraordinary guests that I've been able to speak with. And I'm going to do a very quick bio of Don Romano, the CEO of Hyundai Canada Corp, because if I went through that list, it would take up the bulk, if not all of our time. And just a warm welcome to you, Don. Don is the president and CEO of Hyundai Canada and oversees the operational procedures and strategic implementation of Hyundai and Genesis brands in Canada. Under his leadership, Hyundai Canada has become one of Canada's leading automotive brands and the largest mainstream electric vehicle distributor in Canada. Romano has been president and CEO since January of 2014. And on a corporate level, Romano champions several initiatives with a focus on developing a fair and inclusive corporate culture and strong employee engagement. And again, here are just some of the amazing accolades that Don and the team at Hyundai Canada have received. They've earned multiple awards, including being named a great place to work for 5 consecutive years. Hyundai Auto Canada has also earned the distinction of being one of the best workplaces for women and has also been named a 5-star diversity and inclusion employer by Human Resources Director. And in 2021, Romano was named a notable champion of diversity by Automotive News. And prior to his tenure with Hyundai, Don was a senior managing director and chief marketing officer with ALJ International, where he established Toyota Saudi Arabia. He's also held senior positions with Nissan North America and Mazda Motor Company. And without further ado, a very warm welcome to you, Don, this morning.
Hey, Craig, thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate the great introduction. And yeah, it's just great to be here. So thank you for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome, and looking forward to this conversation. One thing I want to point out, this is something, as I mentioned, I have the privilege to speak with fantastic CEOs, and what I love about you and your story, Don, because sometimes in conversations that I have, people will say, oh, well, it's a smaller organization, right? It's a little more limited. And what I love is that the fundamental principles and philosophies of positive leadership apply regardless of the size of the organization.
Yeah.
And what you've been able to achieve within Hyundai Canada has just been absolutely remarkable. And I do want to start though with when you came on board, you
No.
Hyundai had one of the most challenging relationship ratings with customers, and I just love how you approach that situation. Can we start our conversation there?
Oh, please don't take me back. Um, those were tough days. And one of the things that we learned right when I started was that it wasn't really just the customers, it was our dealer relations were the worst in the industry. Um, and really, they're the ones that interface with the customers directly. So you're not going to be able to inspire and engage your customers unless the people that represent you out in the market are engaged and inspired. So that's where we started. And it was about building relations with the dealers and building trust. It was all based on trust. And there was no trust at the beginning. So I remember our first strategy to try to break that unfortunate situation was to go out and have meetings across the country with our dealers. But there were no presentations. There were no PowerPoints. We sat in a big circle. And imagine car dealers. They're very successful, very strong business individuals, and they're very individualistic. And so they would come into these meetings in this kumbaya type of setting, and they would say, "Okay, what's going on here?" And we would just talk. And I think that was the beginning of a transition for us, where we had a chance to. We said, "Hey, just lay it on the table for us," even there wasn't a table there. And they were very open about everything that we were doing as a company that wasn't working, and what they expected from me as the leader of the company and my team. And so from there, we began to address some of the issues and put together really a different plan of how we're going to establish a strong relationship that would ultimately get to the customers and make customers feel more welcome at our dealerships and more excited about our products.
Well, and thank you for going back to those days. And the reason I wanted to ask, because I think it's just it's an inspiring story. It's an inspiring example. And all of the accolades that I read just before we started, as well as if you Google Hyundai Canada Awards, you will have multiple pages on Google. And reason being, I love that it's a listen first philosophy. So I want to ask you because, as you mentioned, you could have. I would imagine if you poll executives and chief executives, come out with the PowerPoint, go into the
Hmm.
selling mode. You chose to sit there and listen and hear what I'm sure were some challenging messages. What gave you the courage, the strategic insight to say, you know what? Let's get people around. Let's have a conversation.
It was an experience that I had much earlier in my career where I was out in the field with another car company, and I was asked to come back into the headquarters as a CMO. And I remember I was really frustrated with the marketing that our company was producing. And I felt that the organization, the marketing team really wasn't listening. And so I came in and I had the wrong attitude. And it showed, it came out, and my employees were really not excited about me taking the helm as the CMO. And one day, somebody in our HR department came in and said, "Hey, Don, I think you should maybe do a 360 and get input." And I said, "Really? Why? Why is that?" She goes, "Well, just trust me." And I thought, okay, which I did. Didn't sleep for 2, 3 nights. It was terrible. And what I realized is all the baggage that I had collected out in the field, the angst I had against all the what I felt was a team that wasn't really listening to what was going on in the marketplace. It was coming out in my management style, and they felt they were unwanted. They didn't feel respected. They didn't trust me. And so I remember, and I knew these people for a long time, and we'd worked together for over 10 years, and so knew their families, knew their kids, and I thought, man, is this who I am? As I read that 360, and so the next day, then after I finally got a good night's sleep, I got everybody together And I read to them their comments and I apologized. And I said, this isn't who I am. I'm not exactly sure where I went off the rails, but I'm going to get back on because I do respect you and I do trust you. And I know you can produce excellent work and we're going to take this to a different level. And that's exactly what we did. And they were wonderful. They said, Don, this is great. Thank you, for listening. And it just was that was a turning point in my career development, was learning to listen and not take it personal. Well, maybe to a certain degree, but at least listen to the things that how people perceive us and perceived me and what I needed to change. And you have to swallow your pride. And I think your books really talk about this, the importance of humility. And you have to be, if you're going to be a great leader, you have to bring that humility into play. And it was from that point we created, this was with Mazda, we created Zoom Zoom. It became one of the biggest successful marketing campaigns in the world. And it was one of the first global campaigns. And it came from that team that I didn't have a lot of confidence in when I started. And it was really my problem, not theirs. And once I realized that, I decided it doesn't have to be your team. It can be your franchised dealers. It can be your customers. You have to look introspectively. You have to look in the mirror and say, okay, how am I being perceived and what do I need to change to make a successful organization successful?
Well, and thank you for that. And I've got overloaded with comments about, wow, very inspiring. Thank you for sharing, Don. I can't even catch up with the comments here, which is wonderful. And one of the things I have to say, and why, again, I was so excited for us to have this conversation today, Don, because of that authenticity, that transparency. And then also, as you say, putting the ego aside. And a lot of times it's like results, drive, drive, drive for performance. And what I love is about you, your story, your philosophy, and not just the stated philosophy, the lived philosophy is the
Yeah.
power of listening. It's the power of being humble. It's the power of being open to feedback and other perspectives, and that drives our collective performance. And I have right away a question. I'm not surprised. Dave said, Don, this is amazing. I'm so excited and scared by what you just said. I have some difficult 360 feedback and I wasn't sure what to do. How did you overcome the fear that people would react or be angrier with what they were saying when you shared it with them publicly?
You just have to take the leap. It's one of those things. It's the right thing to do. Now, I do have a certain way of analyzing 360, and Craig, you and I discussed it earlier. I have a bookshelf that's not, it's a fictitious bookshelf on my left and a trash can on my right. And my goal is to make sure that as I get comments, my bookshelf is far more full than my trash can. Because sometimes you are going to get comments that are um, maybe less constructive, maybe more personal. Maybe there's issues out there that people are going through, your employees are going through, your dealers are going through, and they want to they want to get it out. And there's nothing wrong with that. And but it isn't going to help you develop. And so that can go in the trash can. You have to be careful. You don't want to put too many in there, but what you want to do is put things in on the bookshelf and then begin to pull them one by one on, try to figure out, okay, how am I going to address this issue or that issue? I had another experience when I was in the Middle East, and this was another uh, uh, turning point, I think, in my career where I wasn't listening, and I realized that the vehicles that we were selling were being delivered to customers without being detailed. And so coming from North America, I thought, well, this is an easy fix, right? I have all the answers, and I'm the senior managing director of a very large company out there, and I'm going to tell them, hey, let's clean our cars. It seems like a pretty simple thing, but without really understanding and asking why. And they were so polite, and the whole team just said, yeah, absolutely, Mr. Dunn, we're going to do that. We're going to clean these cars. But then a month later, they weren't clean. And then a month after that, they weren't clean. So I finally got them all together, and I said, "Hey, why can't we seem to clean these cars?" And this one gentleman, he's still a good friend, and he looked at me. He goes, "Well, we don't want you to get fired. And I
Mm.
thought, well, how is cleaning cars going to get me fired? And he said, well, Mr. Don, when somebody buys one of our cars, it's brand new. And most of the people are independent business people. And if they can afford a new car, their business is doing well. And that's a sign of success. But if it's cleaned, people will start rumors that it's probably a used car and that business isn't that good. So the customers ask us if they can take it back with all the stickers on it and all the cosmoline and the plastic seats. And then people know that it's a new car. And they'll keep it that way for a week or two so everybody can see that they're successful and they have a new car. And then they'll bring it back and then we'll detail it. If we detail them all, they'll go buy a competitor's car. And I thought, why didn't I just ask that question to begin with? Because I wasn't listening. And so, there was another example of where talk less, listen more. It's a good thing to do as if you want to be a good leader, and you just have to listen.
Well, and thank you again. I've got comments around love the trash can bookshelf. I will be using that in my own development toolkit. And me as well. I think it's just such a powerful metaphor. And also, as you say, what's the distribution of where you put things? It's so important because there are, and that's what I appreciate as well, Don, about the approach, that thoughtfulness. When I speak to extraordinarily successful CEOs, it's really around, okay, yeah, you know what? Sometimes things will be personal. And so we can put that aside. We want to be mindful of that and be careful around that. And I also love your focus around that curiosity because in my work, coaching work, speaking work, and conversation, sometimes like, well, why isn't this being done? It's so obvious. And tell. And as you say, just taking a moment to be a little more curious, ask a question. It just unlocks so much information. More questions coming in. I am not surprised. So awesome. And this has been, there are multiple people asking this question. So Emmanuel had also asked it around creating a psychologically safe environment is crucial for honest communication within a team. Could you
Yeah.
share how you fostered this type of culture at a Hyundai, ensuring that your team felt comfortable sharing the true picture without fear of repercussions?
Oh yeah, yeah. So just one more short story.
Yeah.
But one of the things I started doing as a follow-up to meeting with the dealers is we started it's called Discussions with Don, but they're skip level meetings
Mm,
where I meet with groups, but every employee. And I remember 10 years ago, I'd ask, I'd give them a kind of a state of the union. Where are we going? What's happening? What's working? What's not? Maybe out of an hour, that'd be 15 minutes. And then I'll say, but what could we do better? What are some of the things we need to change? And 10 years ago, I'd be lucky if I got one or two comments. So I just finished my last round about 2 weeks ago. And an hour is just not enough time. And what's happened is just doing this over and over and listening. I write down every comment and try to follow up on everything they say. And we're talking pages of comments when you have 250 employees in your organization direct. We have over 10,000 indirect because of the franchises. And but now the conversations are so productive. But it took that time to build the trust where there were no repercussions, that
mm,
everybody felt comfortable being able to say, hey, I think this policy is terrible, or I think this is, I mean, of course, everybody's like, I think we should get paid more. I think the bonuses should be bigger, and and that's fine. That's all. That goes on a shelf too. So it's really good information, but what was really, I would say, not constructive when I first started because we didn't have the trust. We hadn't built the trust. Became very constructive because we kept it consistent. We kept doing it. I kept doing it over and over again, usually twice a year. And it started. We used to we used to have donuts. They called it Donuts with Don. It was their term, and we'd bring in Tim Hortons donuts. And then after a certain amount of time, it just kind of shifted to discussions with Don because we couldn't fit it all in the morning, and nobody wanted to eat donuts at 3 o'clock. But it's still another way to improve the listening and to hear what the employees feel about the company. And you'd be surprised how much creativity will come out of these meetings once the trust is established. And once they know that, you're leaving the ego at the door, you just want to listen and take that input from them. And, and sometimes there'll be comments where you'll just have to tell them, hey, listen, that's just not going to happen. I don't want to give a false sense of expectation here. We're not going to be able to accomplish that, but I'm still going to keep it on the shelf. And, if there comes a point where we can do it, nothing goes off. And really, we put very little in the trash can on those conversations.
Well, that's amazing. And again, one of the things I love, I feel so privileged in the seat that I'm in right now in terms of just being a part of these conversations. And what you just shared, Don, is so amazing. I just had Kim Scott on. She last week released the episode, the best-selling author of Radical
Yeah.
Candor. And one of
Mhm.
the things she was saying was, if you're not getting feedback, and lots of feedback as a CEO, there isn't that safe space for people, and you want to be mindful of that. And I love that story just right away drives home, as you say, that there is that environment of safety, that I can share my ideas and perspectives, and that there isn't that fear of reprisal. And also exactly on with Kim's point, and again, I love the connectivity between these, is that, and then you drive innovation, then you get amazing perspectives, or you can link different ideas together. And I love that. I've got another question. They just keep coming through, so it's just awesome.
I'm here to
Kevin,
listen.
yeah, I was just about to say, listen first philosophy. Kevin said, Don, I love you talked about the consistency and having open forums. I've started town halls with my team, and the first few sessions have been pretty quiet, and I've contemplated giving up. Like, any advice for how I can stick with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It gets back to gets it. Everything gets back to being your authentic self, in my opinion. Um, for me, I grew up in Southern California. My parents were musicians. It was a very liberal upbringing, and that's just part of my fabric of who I am. And most CEOs come from a very conservative, very strict environment. And while I am strict when it comes down to uh, our policies and coming down to our financial obligations and the things that we need to accomplish as a business, when it comes to our people, my upbringing comes right into play. And even though, as I've demonstrated, I've forgotten about those a couple of times, and I paid the price for that, but then I learned from those mistakes. And I think this is the key, is just, but I am who I am, and I want them to know who I am and what I stand for. And therefore, there are people who have very different views of how the world should operate than I have. And we have to deal with that because their perspective is still important, and it should still be shared, and even though it's not my perspective personally, it could be something that contributes to the company's success. So I try not to discount anybody or anything, and that also, it's been helpful because I've lived in a number of countries and went to school in different countries. So yeah, I just think it's not easy. And again, I get back to leaving the ego at the door. It's the most important thing. Becoming self-aware, which is really, I think, well covered in your latest book. So then there's a number of tools like we talked about, the 360s, and having skip level meetings with all employees, and then not doing it once, but doing it consistently. But this will help that self-awareness. And if you can leave the ego at the door before you start any of these meetings, whether it's a big circle of kumbaya or whether it's more of a structured type of environment or a Zoom environment, because we still have a lot of employees that kind of go back and forth between working from home and working in the office. So, you have to be flexible. And if you do those things, you don't only grow professionally, but you grow personally. And I think that's the two have to go together. You can't have one, can't grow professionally if you're not growing personally.
And again, lots of great comments coming in. Thank you. Very helpful observations. And also, Don, a word that you use, which I think is so powerful, and I'll state it around the consistency. because sometimes it starts out, something begins, and then it fizzles, and it's just, hey, you know what? This is who I am. This is what we're going to do. This is what's going to happen. And then over time, that consistency, it's very difficult for people to go, oh, okay, well, that's going to eventually go away. And I love you focus on that, as well as, and that quote you just shared, you do not discount anyone or anything. There's something to learn. Everyone has an opportunity to share their perspective. It doesn't mean I agree with it. It's important for me to hear it. And I just love how you focus on that and really see every exchange, every situation as a learning opportunity. And I want to get your perspective on leadership. It's the, it's always been a hot topic. And now we've come through or are coming through the final laps of COVID. You've got all of this disruption in the world with technology and AI and global instability. When you look at leadership and the leaders of today and tomorrow, what are the core qualities? You talked about self-awareness, which I couldn't agree more. What are some of the key qualities you feel leaders need to possess to be successful now and moving into the future?
Well, I think the first, it starts with self-awareness, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, how you're perceived, and then maintaining a consistent approach as best you can. And we all evolve, so your employees will understand that. And there's going to be, we're all humans. So we're all going to have an evolution that's going to take place, but trying to stay consistent to your values and don't sacrifice your values in order to achieve, a business goal. Um, and then I would say empathy. You need to understand that every one of your employees are going through different challenges in life, and more so now than ever before. And not just because of the pandemic, but you have the social media and what that's created, the ability to have lots of input that our kids are having to deal with that we didn't have to deal with. I mean, I didn't have to worry about people congregating on social media and saying nasty things and then having to deal with that. But my kids obviously did. And your employees will have to deal with those things. And then a lot of us have aging parents, not just kids. Like you're going to have some of your employees are having children, and they're going to have to be able to juggle that. It's far more difficult. I mean, home prices alone, it takes often two partners to get an income level that will allow them to buy a car and a home and all the other goodies that we all think we need, and but especially a home. So they're undergoing challenges that we didn't have to go through, and once you understand that, you can be much more empathetic to the situations that they're dealing with. And so I try to be, in part to my management team, be flexible. It's not about the hours. It's not about checking in and punching a card and then punching it out. It's about inspiring productivity and getting people to feel that they're part of something bigger than a job, and taking a personal interest in their career, and then understanding with an empathetic ear about what they're having to deal with, just because they may be going through a certain period in their life where they really need more than a manager. They kind of need a mentor, and they're the same. If you're a manager, you are a mentor, and you got to keep that in mind. But I would have to put empathy right at the top, because nowadays, if you don't have that, you're never going to build the trust. Therefore, you're never going to get the feedback, and therefore, you're never going to develop personally or professionally. And that's the key. Just have a little empathy for what's going on out there, and try to understand, and that will build the trusting relationship that will give you the feedback you need to manage better.
Well, and I love, and again, I'm too many comments to share out loud on this, and just such heartfelt and important qualities of leadership. And I love, again, it's music to my ears. It's just, and what I love about what you're sharing, Don, you talk about self-awareness, and to me, it's self-awareness and other awareness, empathy.
Yeah.
And awareness is the vitally, that's the vital ingredient. And we can often be in such a rush to judge ourselves, judge others, and understandable in a world that's just moving at lightning pace. And I love how you say, hey, take a moment, right? Tune into
Mhm.
yourself. Think about who you are, your values. And I've got a question on values, which I'll get to in a second. And then also think about the other person, not just what you're experiencing. Hey, this is a disconnect here. Be a little more curious. Wonder about what can be happening in their world. So rather than react to what you're observing, let's engage on that. Let's have a deeper discussion around it. Going back to, I love the point you said, don't discount anyone or anything. I think that's just such a powerful mantra for us as leaders to remember every single time, every conversation, every interaction. And so I got a fabulous question from Anne, who would love to hear your take. Just really inspired by your conversation this morning, Don. Love your philosophy. Wish you were CEO of my company.
Be careful what you ask for.
That's right. Last names are removed for that reason. Um, Wanted to hear more about values and how can organizations identify their values and live their values.
Well, there's everybody's values are different, right?
Right.
And it's finding where the different values intersect that you
Mm,
want to focus on, right? We have different with a truly diverse organization. You're going to have people with different religious backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different languages, different upbringings, different political views, and you don't want to you don't you can't take all those values and say, okay, this is who we are, because now you're everything, which means you're really nothing. And so what you
mm,
want to do is begin to work the organization to find out, where do those values intersect. It usually comes down to personal development. If if you look at your employees not as employees, but when you look at them as people that are going to be developed and need help with that process, both professionally and personally, for their careers and for their families and for their social lives. If you take that responsibility on, you're going to find that there's this intersection where once you've lived in a number of countries, you begin to realize we're all just the same. We're just people trying to get by in a really crazy world. And suddenly all of the other differences begin to dissipate. They go away, and you start looking at what would be helpful for them as individuals. And then some of those individuals will be in groups. Um, and again, it's not a job just for the money for most people. Some people it is, but for most, they want more out of their jobs than just coming to work and getting a paycheck. And they do want to have a feeling of unity within the organization and feel the organization actually is supporting them and helping them achieve their personal goals. So trying to find where they intersect. And for me, one of those areas has always been career development.
mm,
And we can all understand that we're all at different levels, but for the most part, we want to see our careers improve. Some people want to stay in their jobs, but just kind of grow within their jobs. Some will want to be CEOs. Some will want to, there's a trade-off in work-life balance. And I try to always explain that as you move up an organization, right or wrong, it doesn't matter, it just is what it is. There's going to be a trade-off with work-life balance. So if you want better work-life balance, being a CEO probably isn't something you want to aspire to be. But you still want to aspire, even at a entry level position, and that's where you want to stay. You still want to aspire to do better. So you try to find what are those things that you can provide that will help the organization achieve, the collective and individual growth needs of the people that are make up the organization. So we do a lot of training, and that's our main focus. That's, I would say, probably the biggest thing. And sometimes it's how to give a presentation, or sometimes it's how to interact with one another, or how to lead, or sometimes it's to understand cultural differences. And we have speakers from all over come in and talk about diversity. And for me, I mean, it is an important part of my life. I believe in DEI, and I know with all the politics going on right now, sometimes that's getting put aside, I think, in a number of companies. But you can look at it from an altruistic point of view, which I think is important. But you can also look at it from a business point of view. And one of the great things about Canada is we're one of the most diverse countries in the world, which
Mm,
means the customers that are walking through our doors throughout the country, they don't look like me. They're not a bunch of gray-haired old, white guys. And so it's going to be hard to, again, self-reflection, to know that I'm going to be able to make the right decisions on how to go to market and how to present ourselves. And that'd be ridiculous. But I have this diverse organization, and they can relate to all the different individuals that come in and begin to help us improve on how we're going to do that. So there's another intersection right there where everybody has something to contribute that will help our business,
mm.
because we've created a diverse organization and because of their multiculturalness. And so you begin to find those areas, and kind of, again, you're going to have some people that are going to be far left, some people far right, and a lot of that, isn't going to be pertinent on both sides, but there will be areas in between that are pertinent, and that's what you want to grab onto.
So awesome. And again, I've got so many comments and a follow-up question, which I'm certainly going to get to from Jeff. And what I love about what you're saying, Don, once again, is that there's so many different values, and we try to do them all. Well, then, as you say, it's who are we? What do we represent? And I love how your focus is on values alignment, and that brings us together. That's the true north, if you will, right? Our navigational compass. I think that's so inspiring and empowering.
Yeah. And I mean, there are basic values of honesty, integrity, and never giving up on those qualities for the sake of achieving a business goal. And this is pressure that constantly hits everybody in the organization, where, they still have goals to achieve. I mean, we don't walk away from, setting objectives and having KPIs and having reports, and, having to deal with the difficult situations where somebody is failing in an area and another person succeeding, and then the tension that creates. What we try to do is create an organization that says, hey, everybody's capable of greatness. So those that are failing, prop them up, help them out. Let's give them every opportunity to succeed. And don't rate them like this is a bad employee, this is a good employee. You're going down the wrong road. You just want everybody to have an equal opportunity to succeed, and not everybody's dealing with the same circumstances. We have people that deal with our parts division, people in service, people in sales, people in marketing. Sometimes an ad will come out, it doesn't resonate, doesn't work. And so the question is, okay, why did that happen, and how can we learn from it? Sometimes we'll come out with a service campaign, it won't work. Same thing. I make mistakes every day, and I think the important thing is that you feel you're part of an organization where mistakes are allowed. It's a learning process, and they're actually not just allowed, but embraced, where people can actually feel good about making a mistake and learning from it and growing. And I think that is the true value of any successful organization.
Well, and I love that. And I love how you talked about that mistakes are opportunities for learning. Again, this is it's so awesome because I remember speaking with Gary Ridge, the former CEO and chairman of the board for WD-40, and called them, exactly to your point, again, learning moments. So
Yeah.
every opportunity, when we make it, they're going to happen. We're going to make mistakes. Stuff isn't going to work out. These are all learning moments, and it's essential for us to share these moments with each other, these insights, or else we're really not going to grow as an organization. We're not going to reach our potential. Jeff and others have had a similar question, and who said, I love your comment on values. How do you deal with leaders in your company, especially high performers, that don't live the corporate values?
Mm, Boy, that's a great question.
Yeah, I appreciate your patience, Jeff, because I was excited to ask.
Yeah, well, sometimes people just don't fit in the culture. And to me, I think the first issue is as a manager, as an executive, as somebody responsible for a team, your job isn't to rate, it's to raise. You're there to raise the bar for your team and for your people. Again, always professionally and personally. You're trying to help them grow in both areas of their life so that they become a more uh, just a more fulfilled human being. And those are the people that are going to always produce for you. But there are going to be times where you have people that they absolutely do not want to, especially when it comes to DEI, they don't want to hear about it anymore, and I still have to deal with that. And it's like, okay, enough is enough, Don. I appreciate, what you're trying to do, but I just I can't deal with that, because there's going to be a lot of people out there that feel by diversifying, some of the old guards are going to have less opportunity to grow. And my position has always been that that's a fallacy. If we if we diversify, if we believe in equality, if we hold true to our values, and we apply that to our customers, we're going to grow. I mean, we're now the second largest import. There's only one more to go. We've passed them all. Genesis is our luxury brand. It's the number one growth brand in Canada. It's the number one. Canada's the number one country in the world for Genesis, and all this came from the team that we've amassed and put together and trained and raised to think differently. And we have when you buy a Genesis, you buy direct, you buy from us. And yet we brought the dealers along to do the deliveries and service the vehicles. And it's a real interesting hybrid model. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's been extremely successful. It wasn't my idea. This is an idea that germinated through a lot of discussions and what's working, what are some of the new companies doing out there. And so we took these ideas and we put it together. And there are some that actually said, no, this is never going to work from a business perspective, and you're listening to too many people. And Don, I don't see an opportunity for myself because you're now giving opportunities to other people. And unfortunately, those people are probably going to be better suited for their development in another company. And that's going to happen. And you have to have that honest conversation with those individuals that, listen, I don't think this culture is right for you. I don't think our value stream is something that you can embrace. And I'll be honest, and if they're a good employee or a hard worker and we just have different values, then I have an obligation to help them try to find what would be right for them, what kind of company would be right for them. And we have as diverse a group of companies in our industry as you'll find anywhere else. We're not all kind of a cookie cutter approach. We all have different values and different approaches. We're an international company. Our company's based in Korea, but some of the companies are based in Japan. Some of the companies are based in the U.S. Some are over in Europe. So I mean, and that's just what sometimes you have to do. And if you really are thinking of your employees and looking after them both professionally and personally, sometimes the best thing you can do is help them move on.
Well, and again, so many comments coming in. Amazing, very inspiring. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences, Don. Inspired by your authenticity and openness. So it just and I echo those comments. And I think once again, what I love about what you're sharing is around that leaning into those uncomfortable, potentially uncomfortable conversations. Just and then also at the same time going back to don't discount anyone or anything. Hey, you're just not a fit here from a values perspective. And
Right.
so great. Let's both work together to help you be as successful as you can. And it just won't be here where our values are misaligned. And I love that
Yeah.
philosophy because yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, sometimes I had one employee whose values were perfectly aligned, and maybe but I could tell he was sort of at the peak of his professional development. But boy, he had a lot more to offer. It just wasn't in our organization. And I remember getting a call from another a headhunter for an opportunity, and not interested. I love my company and wasn't interested. But as I thought about the job, his picture kept coming up in my mind, and a tremendous employee in every respect, but he had reached his peak in our organization professionally, and I knew he wanted to do more, but a car business can, as you get up, I talked about the work-life balance, and it begins to change, and that really wasn't for him. And so, but this job, it had his name on it. So I sat with him one day and I said, and it's a charity organization, a nonprofit organization, and I said, hey, this company, this nonprofit organizations, they're looking for a president, and I'm sorry, I couldn't help but I have to tell you about it because I'm going to feel guilty if I don't. I don't want to lose you. You've been kind of, one of my greatest allies, supporters, and you've helped the company. But you should look at this because I know your values and I know this nonprofit organization, and it would be a promotion for you that would help improve your life. And so sure enough, he's been there now 8 years, 7 years, and he loves it. And we get to we go to breakfast every 3 months. We get together, and he always starts off thanking me. And I feel better as a human being knowing that I probably could have kept him in that job and benefited from that. But to watch him grow now and lead a nonprofit organization, and he still maintains that work-life balance is a real, it just really feels good. It makes you feel like, hey, we're only on this earth for a short period of time. And if you can help somebody, even just one person, you're going to feel better. If you can help a group of people, you're going to look back at your life and feel it was very productive.
No, that's amazing. And again, just the feedback on your personal stories, Don, so powerful. And what strikes me is people talk about the importance of servant leadership. And I think what you just shared is a masterclass in that, whereby I'm sure live audience listeners can imagine scenarios where someone, well, they're a great contributor, they've been a valuable support. I am not at all in any way looking out, right, what's best for them and who they are. Just love that. And once again, just those human qualities and that empathy and that connectivity to something bigger is so important and pays dividends again. And as you say, you've both maintained an amazing relationship. There's exceptional gratitude, and it's provided the best possible scenario for every single person involved in such a great way. Our time is flying by. I can't believe we're about 10 minutes or so left. This is we could keep going. I was like, it's an hour. So this has just been great. Tara said, congratulations on all the amazing awards, accomplishments, achievements around DEI. Can you share a little bit about what steps you've taken within Hyundai Canada to instill a culture that sees the benefits of DEI and challenges some of those notions you touched on in terms of that pushback?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. But first of all, thank you for the compliment. But I honestly feel that I'd love to have an introduction that talks about nothing but my failures, as opposed to the successes, because I think the growth that has come from the failures just completely overcomes the successes. It's nice to be acknowledged and rewarded, but embrace your failures even more, because those are the things. And I still every day I run into something I did and I regret. Like, what are you doing? That's not you. Why did you make that decision? Or why did you go in that direction? You didn't listen like you're supposed to. That little voice back there. But thank you anyway. I appreciate it. First of all, you need an organization, a core organization that believes in diversity and believes in the power of it. And if you don't have at least a core group uh, that can help support you in that venture in that directive, it's going to be real tough. So you got to first get some people on the island that can help you survive. And once you begin to bring those people in, I have an HR team that is probably the best HR team I've ever seen anywhere in the world. And they're they are my right and left hands when it comes to this. And what they'll do is, we knew right at first when I got hired that this was going to be a bit of a challenge. We are a old established industry made up of white old males, and here's another white older, it was a lot younger then, but basically a white male who had gone through the whole organization. And we were not very progressive when it came down to, well, in fact, we're not progressive as an industry. So what we started to do is the first step was to have people come and speak to us every month and begin to learn from their experiences some of the challenges that they've been through and some of the racism that they've had to deal with, some of the misogynistic practices that they've had to deal with, some of the uh, uh, lack of acceptance of different sexual orientations and different partnerships within a lifestyle. And so we had them all every month, sometimes twice a month. And we didn't make it mandatory, but we would do it during work hours. So it wasn't over lunch, that was your break time. It would be 2 o'clock and it was easier during the pandemic because everybody was on Zoom and it was a lot easier. And now there's sort of a mix, where some are in the office, some are not. So we still do it. We make sure that they can access all these talks, and then we record them as well. So if they happen to be on vacation, or they were sick or couldn't do it for whatever reason, that they still get to hear the voices of the people that have been negatively and positively impacted by either the lack of DEI or just personal social challenges they've had to deal with out on the just out in the streets, and in the markets and such. And once you begin to hear those stories, it begins to affect you. It should affect you. And if it doesn't, then there's probably a problem with the values, as we talked about earlier. So just making that accessibility, and it's not people now we actually bring people in the organization because the trust factor has gone up so much that they even get to hear from employees who have joined the company, have been with us a few years, but had different backgrounds where they've had to encounter just terrible, unfortunate situations that should never occur, and how they dealt with it. And I can tell you the most ardent conservatives that I wouldn't call them anti-DEI because they probably wouldn't be with our company if that were the case. But they began to slowly but surely see the light. And now they see the impact to our business. And, we've been very successful. We've had a really great run for the last decade. And we're outperforming most of the other countries in the world, and they're seeing that. It's not just Hyundai, but it's Hyundai Canada, and they live in Canada, so they understand the diverse nature of our country. And so anyway, they eventually will come along or they'll leave, and that's kind of how it works. But you got to just give them access, and it's not the kind of access where you're preaching on the top of a pulpit. It's the kind of access where you're hearing real human beings and what they've had to deal with in their lives. And once you hear that, and if you have empathy and you understand and you've got an open heart to understanding that, we're all just we're here on the planet for a short period of time. And if we can help one another, regardless of what we believe in from again, political, religious, cultural perspective, that there is that one spot in the middle where we're all bound together. And if you focus on that, I've seen the most ardent people that had absolutely no time for DEI said it's a communist plot. I've seen their hearts open up, and they've become really good managers, better managers, more effective managers. And yeah. And yet they do have perspectives that we don't discount as well when it comes down to concerns and issues. And so we don't alienate that. There is a line that has to be drawn because if it crosses that line, then we have to have a one-on-one talk, and then we have to talk about values. But yeah, that's how we address it.
That's amazing. Well, and so many things, and again, a term I use earlier, it's a master class in empathy. I love that you just use that because to have those personal stories. And back to your comment earlier about consistency, these are consistent conversations that we're going to have. And I do want to shine a light, Don, because I think it's so powerful and often a missed opportunity. Once again, this isn't a lunch hour thing. That it's during this is a priority for us. This is during work time, and this signifies the importance, the prioritization that we're putting on this. All of those elements just come together so impactfully so that people can see. And as you say, even those with diverse perspectives, more conservative perspectives, now you get exposed to it in a non-threatening way, in an area whereby that it's very much about let's learn and grow together and build on our
Absolutely.
strengths you talked about. It's just so awesome. And then people come along together and grow that appreciation. And so, and again, so many comments saying thank you, thank you. This is just, I wish more CEOs would approach these topics in this way. I just I love that. And
Well, if you're not with a company that has that perspective and those values, then look for other companies. Don't you can't always change people. But I do want to add one thing, and that is whether you're a manager or you're not, you still have a responsibility to lift those around you. And I try to impart that on everybody. You know, every comment that's made, everything that's said, if you can maintain positivity and try to lift up everybody, raise them up. Again, if you're a manager and you're focused strictly on rankings and performance, you're missing the boat. You know, you've got to get on the ship of getting everybody to feel like they're part of something bigger than a job, and that you do have a personal investment in their welfare, whether you're a manager or not. It could be a colleague next to you, and they're going to hear things that you say, and they're going to begin to either feel better or worse because of it. Try to make them feel better because of it. Try to make everybody, you know, there's a lot of little things we didn't talk about that you know, rumor mills and snide comments that can be just as destructive as a bad CEO. So, you know, just remember, we all have a responsibility for the culture of our organizations, and also don't be afraid to speak up. And if they don't like what you have to say, then you're probably in the wrong organization.
And I love that. And again, for me, and people can probably or certainly see why I was so excited for us to talk about, and that emphasis on the positivity and positive leadership and having a positive impact on the people around us. Because it goes to, and as you say, and then the results speak for themselves. It's not an either or. When
Yeah.
we are positive leaders, and as you say, no matter where we are in the organization, positive results follow. So this has just been awesome. I'm so appreciative of the time. I know there's so much more. There are other questions that we didn't get to. So thank you to everybody. Any final words, Don, as we close our conversation today? This has truly been a masterclass in positive leadership. Love your passion, your experience, sharing your stories, your candid approach to this. Any final words or something we didn't touch on you'd love for listeners to take away?
No, I think we covered everything. I would encourage them to read your books. I think they're just dead on. They're absolutely a great guidepost for success. And just remember, all of us have a role, and positivity in lifting people up is more than just making a successful organization. It's about being successful human beings. And
Mm.
if you can put those two together in this short period that we're on this big round bubble thing here, this marble, uh, you're going to look back at your life and you're going to feel that you really made a difference. And all of us can make a difference, whether we're a CEO or we're at an entry level. It doesn't matter. Positivity affects everybody, and that's all. That would be it.
Love it. That's amazing. Couldn't think of a better way to close. Someone wrote mic drop closings. And another saying this is one of my favorite podcast episodes I've heard in a very long time. So I couldn't agree more. and it's been such a pleasure and privilege to talk to you, Don. As I like to say too, building on your point, we're all the CEOs of our lives, and so we have choices to make in terms of how we're going to show up and support ourselves and others. So this has just been great. Thank you to the live audience for your amazing questions and your engagement. Thank you to Don for your time today. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, comment, and keep the community building so we can have the positive impact that Don so beautifully talked about today. Don, thanks so much. This has been absolutely awesome. Look forward to seeing everyone soon. Bye for now.
Take care. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.